All right, so welcome to the first installments of Perelandra. This is Verum Fabula Fellowship at Drinkling's Coffee House in Wilmore, Kentucky. I'm Wes Mullins, and you guys are you guys.
Hi, guys.
So, this is Lewis's second book in the Ransom Trilogy, and we mentioned that this book was going to set your hair on fire, and for a book where there's very few characters and lots of dialogue, it keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Hi, we're waiting on.
All right, and there is Randy. How's it going, man?
The king of drinklings.
The king of.
And there's Randy, who's
He's
super
late. now.
We literally started 1 minute ago.
He was taking care of business, I'm sure. All right, so initial reactions to Perelandra. How many have read it?
I was gonna say, can we see how far everybody is?
Yeah. So how many read it before?
I'm 70 pages in.
70? Of
70.
course, it depends on the book.
Just started.
I am to chapter.
We have that version somewhere.
I read it
too.
before, but I'm chapter 5.
I'm chapter 6.
Okay, that's what I figured. Chapter 5, chapter 6.
I'm chapter 2.
Okay, so
So we're just going early. What about you? I mean, chapter 3.
okay,
You said there is no chapter 5.
so David's read it. Who else has read it before? Okay, so there's so about half of us have read, half of us haven't. So for those of you that haven't read it, initial reactions to Perelandra versus Out of the Silent Planet and other Lewis books. What did you think of how he was setting the story up?
Even more on the nose about Jesus than the first one was. I think.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
about the fall, about Adam and Eve, about the whole. I don't want to get too into it. I'm only chapter 6, so I don't know anything past that. But just I'll just say this: the conversations that he's having with the said character that is there.
The said character.
That is there. I don't
Wow.
What's chapter 6? Where is that? I don't remember where the chapter numbers correspond to the plot.
He is talking. I don't want to give away too much because not everybody's there yet. But he's talking with someone who's there.
I think we can say that.
Okay.
Yeah, the green
The
lady.
lady. Yeah, he's talking to the green lady, the queen.
So he's beginning the conversation.
Yeah, he's just talking with her a lot. Like it's like the whole chapter 5 is
Chapter
just
5 and
dialogue.
chapter 6 is that conversation.
They're just
Yeah.
like dialogue, yeah. And it's just I was just mind blown the whole time. So this is likely just introducing knowledge, just how. And then it was crazy because I was reading Ecclesiastes today, but he was talking about, wisdom, of course, and everything's just of it. But I was reading through when he's talking about wisdom and like the good and the bad of wisdom and how hard, like the burden you take on when you have wisdom, and just thinking it was perfect timing that we're talking about this because the whole thing is just so sad when she's learning, she's growing older every day or every second, she's growing older with this conversation with him. I'm just ready to talk about it.
This is the part that blew my mind in this book is like how well it's like you read Genesis and you're like, all right,
just a lot of missing parts.
kind of know what's going on, and then you read this and like, how the heck did he
Do this.
his brain come up? I'm like, I bet this is how it happened.
Yeah.
It's like it makes sense. Not that it is how it happenpened, but it's just like a reimagining. I'm like,
It almost doesn't matter if it's.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't matter.
It's
But
just
the fact that
amazing.
we can comprehend that something had to have happened. Along the lines of this.
yeah, he kind of blew my mind that he could come up with that.
So how did we go from innocence to being corrupted? What would it take? What would that process take
This thing.
for us to get there? And so he basically, again, as Michael Ward says, Lewis is a bulldog to follow a line of logic, to follow a line of questioning and go, okay, here's my question. How do I wrestle this out? This follows this, follows this, follows this, follows this, follows this, follows this. And you get down to it, we're like, he's pulling apart the layers and going, where did this thing have to go? And he's going, the conversation would almost necessarily have to go here, and then it would have to go here, and then it would have to go. It's brilliant how he does it. Who else?
That out of problem paying. He's like, the problem with reading Genesis so literally is that we think that basically God invented dumb creatures. That God created dumb creatures who could fall in 30 seconds.
Right.
And it's like, we don't, however you decide to take the fall, in the most literal sense, it probably would have taken eons and eons and eons, because you have to describe things like, what is death to somebody who doesn't even know what death is?
Well, they don't even know what life is.
Or what is life, or what is good, or what is evil, or things like that, you know?
So let's just take for a second.
And I think it's awesome, the question that she asked. Like, the first one is what is peace? When he's like, I come in peace.
Yeah, what's the first line in this?
She never let
That
you know that.
assumes you know what the opposite of it
Yep.
is.
Yeah.
Right. So when I ask this question all the time, when did you become conscious?
Yesterday.
Wow.
Just now.
I've been
I
putting
saw
on
it.
facade up until now.
So I guess that it was somebody said I was born yesterday. You would actually say that.
Assume that I'm conscious.
Yeah. We don't know when we became conscious. We just I've been conscious, but there was a point when I wasn't conscious. But now that I am conscious, and there'll be a point when I'm not conscious. And this is weird. Now, how do I know that I'm conscious? How do I begin to wrestle with am I alive? And who am I? What am I? Where did I come from? Am I good? Where am I going? Everybody has to wrestle those questions. It's just fantastic. Okay, somebody else, their initial responses to this, or you're being reintroduced to it, and then some of your responses the second, third, fourth time around.
What I love is the way Lewis can evoke feelings. Just the description of walking from the train station to Ransom's house, and all these feelings like I should turn back. And I was thinking, powers of darkness working at him, that's filling his mind with all that sort of stuff. And just, you could feel him having to press through all that darkness and all that doubt and all that, just to get to Ransom's house and be totally freaked out.
I was nervous
I felt that
reading
before.
it.
Yes.
Just,
It's one of
I
the
was
best
nervous reading it.
explanations.
I was like, oh my gosh.
And the way that he's talking to himself too, because it's like that makes you nervous.
And it can only be done in literature. That's that's the one thing I really appreciate about it, is you can't do that. You can't do that almost in any other art form. He just brings it out so well, that moment by moment, that back and forth, and especially the second guessing that happens. He follows that line of logic very well, but it's just something we've all experienced. It's like, well, did I actually think that? Or wait, no, what? And then like that, that kind of thought process where you're bouncing back and forth, and then you kind of see dimly, no, that's not really me, and you kind of move forward. But I also like the providence that happens several times that he throws in there. Very clear providence that actually gets him to the house.
Yes.
Yeah.
For example, the backpack almost itself. Had he not left that on the train accidentally, it's plausible that he could have just been like, you know what, this is too much, I'm going home.
Yep.
But that backpack was like, I can't do anything. I gotta go on. I gotta go on, my only friend in town. So I gotta keep pushing through
It was
this.
so intentional.
Yeah, there's a lot of little cool little just drops in there that kind of got him through the whole thing.
It reminds me of, in a weird way, it reminds me of Scrub in Dawn Treader when he walks down the mountain to get to the dragon, to the cave, because there was fog, and the only path that he could walk down was what he saw in front of him. The next day, when it was a clear sky, he looked up there. It was sheer drop-offs, and he would have never had the courage, or even he would have been scared to death to walk down that. But because he couldn't see where he was going, it was obscured. He actually had a much easier time getting down to that. So
That's another good internal dialogue there, and it does that from a child's perspective so well too. Which is also another good thing. He's kind of going back and forth and fighting with, actual evil impulses that are being brought up in his mind that he doesn't really realize, but they're more subtle in that version. It's really interesting.
I think back to what you were saying before, you get away from like literature can do this and other forms of art can do this. My biggest argument is like I was not a Harry Potter person for a very long time. You guys know this. I thought it was stupid. Didn't read it. Never watched the movie. Only seen like little clips of it. And then I read it when I was older in college and just loved it. Then I watched the movies. I would read a book, then watch the movie. Read a book, then watch the movie. And I think my biggest argument now for people who love the movies more than the books or who have never read the books but have watched the movies is you don't get that. You don't get any. And there's so much internal dialogue with Harry. Like, so much that you see him grow. You see these parts. Even with Dumbledore trying to protect him, you don't see him outwardly doing it. You hear him thinking about it and like how he's like fighting off, do I do this? Is this the way that I mentor Harry? Is this the way? I don't know. There's just so many thoughts that you don't get to see or hear, whenever you're watching the movies.
How do you do that with this movie?
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine. You would miss, if this is a movie, you would miss everything.
How are you going to make this movie?
So,
you would miss all of it.
My solution to this, I'm going to throw this out to you, David, and see what you think.
Because we want this movie to happen.
Yes, because I do.
All three.
I would like to start the movie through the vehicle of Perelandra and the dialogue, and have moments of flashback to Out of the Silent Planet to fill in the gaps.
Also do 2 movies in one.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It would take so much work.
It would be too long. You have to cut a lot out. But
3 hours, Lord of the Rings.
unless you cut it in half. And you did
Part
only
1 and
half the
2?
story for
Like
each.
Harry Potter.
Mockingjay.
Like you did half of it for this, half of it for that. Like, and you kind of cut it off at maybe the point at which the Hanakra comes along and the Silent Planet, and then I won't say we're in this one because we're not there yet. But yeah, that could happen even in a 2-hour, 2.5-hour film. But yeah, that would be really interesting to try. Be better as a miniseries though.
What? Chris! He's here!
Welcome, Chris.
Shock and delight.
Someone told me the other day, they've only ever watched the movies Harry Potter, and they said, I just cannot believe J.K. Rowling stopped the book when Blank dies at the end of the movie. And I was like, she did it. And they were like, yeah, she did. And then the next one started off, right after that. And I said, that's one book. Read the book. I was like, that's one book, 2 movies. And they were just baffled. They were like, no way. I said, yeah, she didn't do that.
I know, I find that whenever I'm watching it with my younger son, because he hasn't read it.
So he's like, oh my gosh, they stopped
my
it
older son
right
has read
when...
the books, but my younger son isn't as much of a reader, but he loves watching the movies. And so we'll be watching the one of them together, and I'll say, now in the book, it says this, and in the book, it has all this, or it has the
I have
book,
a t-shirt that says the book is better, and that goes for everything I've ever read or watched.
You know why they did Harry Potter the way they did, and why they're not longer. Well, I'm just saying, if they had included everything, those movies would never have ended.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Now, those of us who are super nerds would be like, yeah, 5 hours long.
Like Lord of the Rings extended edition.
Intermission.
Yeah.
No
So
problem.
the extended cut stinks. And Return of the King. There's so many things that are wrong with the extended cut.
But I like that hideous strength. That would be my ultimate. You'll see why. The ultimate movie.
I would love for this to be a movie, I just can't imagine.
Yes.
There's a lot more you can work with and a lot more activity.
Yeah.
This is like, let's hang out on a planet, just 2 people, maybe 3.
The really big problem with this movie, though, is that they're naked.
Yeah, they are naked in the whole book, right?
Well,
It could be a new kind of.
You have to be very clever in where you place the leaves.
Yes.
Where are the leaves coming from? I mean, there aren't leaves at first, are there?
Why is this dragon always on top?
Yeah, right.
There's 3 of them. This is the second one. The first one's quick. I mean, it's short minutes. It's like.
All right. I want to read this and have you.
It's really good though.
Let's wrestle with this for a second. As I plodded along the empty, unfenced road which runs across the middle of Worcester Common.
Right?
Yeah,
I can.
Worcester,
Yeah, there's Worcester Common. I tried to dispel my growing sense of malaise by analyzing it. What, after all, was I afraid of? The moment I had put the question I regretted, I was shocked to find that I had mentally used the word afraid. Up till then, I had tried to pretend that I was feeling only distaste or embarrassment or even boredom. But the mere word afraid had let the cat out of the bag. I realized now that my emotion was neither more nor less nor other than fear. I realized I was afraid of 2 things. Afraid that sooner or later I might meet an Maleldil, and afraid I might be drawn in. I suppose everyone knows this fear of getting drawn in. The moment at which the man realizes what it seemed mere speculation are at the point of landing him in the Communist Party or the Christian Church. In the sense that the door has just been slammed and left him outside.
On the inside.
Or left him on the inside.
Autobiographical.
Literally.
That's his That's his
That's his testimony
conversion.
right there.
I underlined that part myself today. Because I was like,
So I had that thought.
it's that, like, how many people struggle with this idea of, it's like you want the knowledge, but you don't want the knowledge.
Yeah.
Because if you get the knowledge, then you have to carry that knowledge. And you can no longer be ignorant. You can no longer be ignorant of the Communist Party or the Christian Church. You have to make a choice. And you're in once you're in. You can't get out because you know now.
That's what he says in Surprised by Joy. Lewis says that it chased him. He's like, the Lord chased me down and like beat me. What did he say? He like beat my college door down and like found me that night.
I became the most reluctant convert. And there's who's the English poet, the Hound of Heaven?
Yes.
William. He's some great English poet, but he said that the Holy Spirit chased him down like a hound and would not get off of his scent.
By the way, November 7th, we're going to see the viewing of The Most Reluctant Convert at Cinemark, Fayette Mall.
Was it Wilberforce?
I was waiting all over
It's
that.
the first ones on November 3rd are almost all sold out. The second, The Most Reluctant Convert, they made into a movie. It's just over an hour long, an hour and 12 minutes.
And
what is the most reluctant film?
That's a play, but now they've made it into a movie.
They've made it into a movie about Lewis's.
Is this the one where he's no, never
You're
mind.
gonna need it because that's terribly acted.
Oh no,
Is it?
they got some bad actors in there.
I don't
Well,
know, I just watched
It's a bummer.
the preview
Oh, well.
and I was like,
I do happen to know one of the actors in there, so
One of the actors is great in it.
Yeah.
Like he's from All Creatures Great and Small.
the
It's an awesome show.
the priest
it just looks
from Trinity Church is actually Michael Ward. So
I hope he doesn't have a huge yes, I hope he has a great acting role in it.
This is okay. When are you watching it?
November 7th. Sunday. 3
Is
o'clock.
it a fountain event? Is that what it is? Is it like a recording of the play?
No,
they,
it's an actual
they
movie.
made it a movie,
Oh, it's an actual movie.
actual movie.
I want to come.
I personally thought the preview looked good, so different opinions.
It's-
Most reluctant convert.
All right, so what are the two things that we're afraid of? Afraid of getting taken in, and the other thing is we're afraid of being left out. Right? The two things of either I get drawn into something and it's terrible, or there's something amazing and I get shut out. FOMO, right?
FOMO.
Yeah.
In a ring.
And in a ring, yes.
That's a great.
Again, that's why I brought it up, because there's Lewis, the Inner Ring, Weight of Glory essay talks specifically about this. Everything that Lewis, most everything he talks about in his philosophy and he makes an argument for, you will find in his fiction. And I think that's just fantastic. Another quick note, best preface I've ever read to this book. Mine had 5 lines.
I don't know if I have one. Do I?
This story can be read by itself. It is also a sequel of Out of the Silent Planet, which is
Oh, here it is.
some account given of Ransom's adventures in Mars, or as its inhabitants call it, Melechandra. All the human characters in this book are purely fictitious, and none of them is allegorical. C.S. Lewis.
All right.
That's it. That's the preface. I'm like, all right, chapter 1,
Ready
let's
to
go. That's all I needed.
Just want everyone to know Wes ate his words because he wrote the Fortune my book. So.
I did. I
He
did.
ate his words.
You made me.
Quite in-depth one.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it wasn't a short one either.
No, I want to do it justice. Other feelings as we get into the book. What some of the people, what were your feelings getting into it?
I thought from a literary perspective it was much stronger than
Yeah.
the first one.
Yeah.
I think he's figured out what he wants to do. You can also see a lot of the themes just a bit more developed in this one, and how they're connected with some of his earlier stuff. I don't remember how many years apart.
For several years.
These
These
books are
both, this
written,
one and Outside Planet.
yeah, 1938 and
44?
1944.
Yeah, 44, yeah.
He wrote a lot in between
Wow.
those
Mhm.
years, including some Narnia and stuff like that. And I think you just see a lot more of those themes that originally he's still kind of working out in the beginning.
This is considered one of his best.
Yep. So you start to see myth and stuff like that
Mhm.
developed a bit more fully in here.
I'm just going to be really blunt. This one's not. I loved the end of Outside Planet. I'd read it again, but the beginning was a little bit boring.
Out of the Silent Planet?
Yeah. I think this is not nearly as boring from start to finish.
Well, because he starts you in
No.
fear.
Yeah, you're like ready to rock and roll.
Yes.
The other one, I was like, when is he going to get there? He's just words and words and words and words.
What's interesting is when you get to that, so he, like Randy said, he doesn't know where he's going when he starts out on the Silent Planet. I think you as an author,
I was going to say,
we had this conversation.
We had this conversation.
You know,
one of my books.
So Caitlin figured out as an author, as she got to the second half of the book, she knew right where she was going, and it was so much better. Then she went back in the beginning, and she had to redo the beginning because she didn't. In the beginning, she was, as we all do. You're where do I want to go with this? Where are you taking me? And then the book finally grabs a hold of you and says, "We're going this direction." By the time you're in half the book, you can just go. But then you have to go back and the beginning of that. It's just terrible. I have to go back and shore this up. What's interesting as well is has anybody have any of you read The Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton? I was having a conversation with Michael Ward, and we were talking about Chesterton, and I said, you know what? It was wildly imaginative. It was fantastic. I have no idea what he was talking about. Like, I don't get it. And he's looked at me and said, I don't think Chesterton did it either. I don't think he knew exactly where he was going with the book or what he really wanted to do with it. And I went, oh, that's interesting. Out of the Silent Planet, at the beginning, Lewis didn't know where he was going with it. But for all the people who had a problem with the sci-fi, Lewis took care of that problem in this book. He completely sidestepped the science fiction.
I'm going to go this way.
And he went, let's go spiritual.
He also went more into world creation.
Yeah.
Kind of universal creation and stuff like that. So, whereas originally he was just trying to create this one narrative about this one place, all of a sudden he's starting to think of more in cosmic proportions.
Yeah.
And you see that, okay, he's going to continue to develop this beyond just these two books. Obviously, that went into the third book there too. But he developed that in Narnia, right? It's kind of the world. And I think that some of what you see developed here is just a bit more like, all right, I'm going to play with, what this whole thing would look like we talked about with atmosphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or Tolkien in fairy stories talking about everything's got to operate according to rules. Even if they're different than ours, they still got to operate according to rules. And so specifically where he talks about language and stuff like that, he started to apply rules and stuff like that.
So let's wrestle with that a second, because this just really sparked something. Out of the Silent Planet, I actually wrote this down. From an archetype, you have Ransom is an everyman, right? He has no claim to fame. He has nothing special about him. He's a philologist who's on vacation. His epistemology is very limited. His life experience is very limited. So could it be that he is seeing that the limitations that Lewis is stuck with are dictated to him by the epistemology of Ransom? He can't get beyond that because everything is seen through the limited perspective of Ransom. But once Ransom goes and talks to the Oyarsa and gets imbued with more information, suddenly his imagination now is expanded, his epistemology is expanded. So when we start the next book, the places that Lewis can go with him is expanded as well. And that atmosphere can be created because Ransom now goes from being the everyman to now he's the hero. He's the savior archetype in this one. Mm-hmm. And then we get that hideous strength and he becomes another archetype. He goes through another archetype. And so it's a progression of Ransom, which also means it's a progression of the books in the expanse of the universe is expanding. As Ransom's epistemology is expanding, the universe expands with it. Because he can only express to us what he can comprehend and he can grasp.
Although the third one he does take a different tack on how he uses the characters and their perceptions. And it kind of does a little bit in this one versus Out of the Silent Planet too. In Out of the Silent Planet, he does a lot of... he's a lot more third-party narrator, overarching commentary in retrospect. And in this one, he actually, other than the first two chapters, sticks with the moment almost the entire way through until the very end. And so it's interesting how he frames each one of them in a different sort of temporal sense as we go on through the books. Because he doesn't do that in almost any of his other literature. It's usually just straight through. Like he just keeps you keep the voice the same. He keeps the voice the same all the way through in Narnia, and pretty much everything else he writes. But this one he changes the voice quite a bit.
Yes, he does.
And like in the third one, it's almost completely different. And then
I was thinking about because Ransom doesn't speak in first person in the third book.
no, and
Really?
and Lewis isn't involved at all.
No. Yeah. So it is a very each of these books are standalone books, as well as Lewis points out, and so you're wondering if he wasn't. Which I think what if we posit that Lewis is actually, as Randy said, he's actually manipulating. He's testing out different atmospheres to see what he can do with a different atmosphere, and so. We know we have Maleldil, which is Mars. So if we accept Michael Ward, and is there a Martian feel to Out of the Silent Planet, and then is there in Perelandra the Venus? Is that the Venus feel to this book?
Already.
And then you have Earth. Is there a I forget what Earth is called. It starts with a G.
What do you mean, our planet's name?
Yes.
Fulcundra.
No, not in this. It's in.
It's supposed to mean Jovial.
Mars, Venus, and Earth has another name in the medieval.
Tellura something.
Tellurian is the name of humans,
Yes.
and from his perspective.
All right, so that could be why the different atmospheres and the different voices are required. So it could be that he just decided to do other things with it. But Lewis, you rarely makes arbitrary. There is something arbitrary, but it's interesting to notice that the different voices coming through. What did you guys think about the fact that everybody's past chapter 3, right?
Nope.
Except for Chris.
I don't remember. I don't remember it, but it's fine.
You're on 3. Okay, so remind me: is he in the story yet? Is he made it to Perelandra yet, or is he just getting?
I think he's just getting ready to go, isn't he?
Yes.
Okay.
He's about to,
Well,
they're about
he's
to tell
back,
you.
and then he's starting to tell stories.
Okay, so he's back.
Yes.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
Use the word transsexual.
Yeah,
Yes.
he did use transsexual in a different way.
Yeah, it's completely different way, but yeah, it was interesting. I was like, man, people get a hold of this book.
People are going to be
Randy circled that one.
transsexual.
So progressive.
He's looking so progressive.
What do you guys think? So, what do you guys think about it from a literary perspective? You tell the reader everything's going to be okay, but here's my story.
Oh, I love that.
Happens all the time.
I love
Yep.
that.
Did that
I'm
make?
surprised
Did
you
it
liked
make?
it.
Is it,
I know I hate a spoiler,
Yes.
so it kind of...
that's what I was wanting to know. Is like,
Yeah, I
does it
hate a
spoil it
spoiler.
for you? Okay.
I don't think so, because I think the way he departed, or the way that you see him outside of the planet, and then the way that you see him come back, there's a change in there
Mhm.
that's very fundamental.
Yeah.
Almost to the sense that I would be like, not that I would like hanging around with you, because you're kind of
Yeah.
egotistical, like, oh, look at me, I've been on space trips.
And look at me now
Look at all
glowing.
you earthlings, and I
Yeah.
got golden hair.
Yeah,
and stuff like
glowing
that,
now.
No foreign, and that's the language of the
Solar.
So, I don't know, there's a bit, and it's like, all right, your trip better have made it worth it for this to be earned, this confidence to be earned. I remember when you were outside the planet.
Yeah.
You were like, I don't know if I want to go here, and now you're like,
Yeah, I
Is
think
this
it
your
made me
first time reading
inquisitive.
Right.
Because, like I
I've
said,
never
I was
read
kind
the
of
third
bored
one.
through some of Out of the Silent Planet. So I was like, I'm not about to listen to him go through this whole story again and it be just like the beginning average. So when he comes back and he tells me, hey, something wild happened, I'm glowy,
And
I'm
he's
muscular, and I'm
He's changed physically, but he's also wounded.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
miss you.
Yeah.
And so that piques the intrigue.
Oh.
So
Oh.
there's a lot of
No.
things that made me like more excited to read. That I think, for me, if Out of the Silent Planet wouldn't have been a little bit not as great for me in the beginning, I don't think I would have liked it. But since I was already a little skeptical about the beginning, at least,
Yeah.
I knew it would come together in the end. But also, I think this is the second book, and if you know that, you kind of know he's not going to die. Come on, he's not going to come from me.
If there's a trilogy, he's not
gonna
going to die.
So that wasn't spoiling that for me. I think it sparks my inquisitiveness.
But
Like, what is going to happen? What
Well, we
happens.
don't know if Ransom's going to be in this third one.
I guess that's true, but I just didn't think I don't know. I had this idea that he wouldn't kill him.
There's a spoiler his heel, the wound on his heel, is really just really bad athlete's foot.
From being in there so long.
Because he was so
That's all.
athletic.
I understand.
And this is the academic answer.
Yeah, athlete's feet. Okay. Perfect. That's
It's a
fantastic.
serious case of Venetian athlete's foot.
Venetian.
Nice. That looked the celestial coffin.
Celestial.
Got
Now,
it from the twig
what-
shoes.
What about the coffin? What's that all about?
That was interesting choice.
I loved that. I've always thought that was such a good idea.
Yeah. What? Let's play around with that. What do you think the coffin? What could that symbolize? Because we know again, Lewis doesn't. Things aren't arbitrary. So why choose a coffin?
It's a bit on the nose if you think about it for like a couple seconds. It's
Yeah.
like, it's on the nose.
Death and rebirth.
Yeah. I mean
Yeah.
that's
New person coming soon.
he leaves one person. He comes back
Yeah.
a new creature. Right.
And also, I think he's trying to push the whole end of Out of Sight Planet was about fear. It's about fear and how the only thing that Ransom did wrong was he was so afraid.
Yeah.
And so I think stepping into the coffin instead of a spaceship or something else signified a lot of courage, knowing that he could go away and die, And he was ready to take that on now.
And
he wasn't afraid.
willingly laying in the coffin.
Yes, and
Yeah.
being like, I'm ready to do this.
Laying down your
Yeah.
I
life.
think the bravery and
The
courage.
spaceship presumes that you're coming back.
Yes.
Ooh.
Coffin
Yes. That's
can
good.
imply
Oh
that
yeah.
There you
you may
go.
not actually be coming back. And so,
And he was excited,
Are you ready? for
like
this?
elated to get in that thing. He was
That-
so ready.
Contrast that with now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold it. Hold it.
That was a good. I mean, even
I'm with
that before you discover it's a coffin, that whole part where he's tripping over everything, and you're like, "What the heck is in that hallway? Like, is it?
I know, I'm like,
Is
what?
it gross? That he smells something weird, and he's like falling on it, and like the way C.S. Lewis described all that made me like feel all those things and wonder. It was like, hurry up and tell me what it is, because it was really cool.
There's a podcast I listened to once that talked a lot about like the wisdom that you learn and actually building your own coffin, and encouraging people to be like, spend some of your life like creating the thing that you will probably wind up buried in.
I don't want
55-gallon drum.
Like,
I don't
not a whole
know.
lot of people
Here's a little
are gonna
cookie
do
jar.
that, but
I like that. I'm
I'm
gonna
sure
do that.
the activity.
Caitlin's like, I'm doing it now.
I was gonna say when I get home this weekend.
Art project.
Actually, I have it. I'm going to grow some aromatic tobacco. I'm going to cure it. I'm going to turn it into pipe tobacco. And I'm going to make sure all of my friends get my pipe tobacco with my ashes in it. And
Oh,
Nice. Can't wait to not smoke that.
gross. You've mentioned this
He
before.
would.
It's so nasty.
BFF died.
Like my friends are gonna smoke me. I'm like,
I think I'll pot my own. I think my own urn. Can I do that? Is that
That's
is
what I
that-
said. I was
would I
like-
get the same wisdom
But
out of it?
just the whole like you're encountering this, right?
yeah.
I think that's a bit. Oh, that's so
Something happens to you,
deeply
you get to
artistic.
participate.
Yeah.
Moving to do
Yeah.
that. That
Yeah,
will
cool.
mess some people up in a good way. I want to do that.
Carving on
You
grapes.
planted a seed.
I'm in.
You've planted
So
a
you-
seed, David.
Yeah.
You guys mentioned that there's this old Coast Guard story that I don't. They actually. Did anyone see the Finest Hour? Not the Finest Hour.
Yeah, the final hour is the seed. It was the Coast Guard one.
Okay, yeah, Chris
Yeah.
Pine.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he has a line in there that it's an old adage line. It's an old like wives' tale line, I think. But it's there's a storm and there's a ship that's being shipwrecked, and there's no way that they're going to make it out there, and they're running to the boats, and the younger Coast Guard person says, "We'll never make it back," and the older guy says, "It's not our job to come back. It's just our job to go." And that's kind of what Ransom, that coffin thing is saying. You might not come back. Are you willing to lay down your life? I have a mission for you.
That's the silver chair, right? When he's shackled up and Puddleglum is and Puddleglum is like standing there and they're like freaking out. It's like, if we let him go, what if he kills us? And he says, oh, he surely will. But and he said our job is not to ask questions, our job is to do it.
And Lewis's reaction, or I'm sorry, not Lewis's, Ransom's reaction to the question that Lewis poses him about that is so strong. I wish I could remember the exact words, but it's so good, and it's like it's not flippant about his life. That's the other thing that people could construe it as, but that's
Right.
not what it is. It's like it's transcending the value of his life. It actually brings more value to his life from his perspective that he is going to go and potentially not come back for the sake of what he's going for.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, really cool.
You mentioned something, and actually I am putting together an essay where I parallel, we talked about C.S. Lewis parallels, I parallel Silverchair and Perelandra. I think that that Silverchair is the fairy tale version of this Perelandra story, and the Perelandra story actually has a deep roots in Beowulf.
Wow.
It's Beowulfian. There's when you get to the end chapters of the climax, you're going to see there's a very Beowulfian archetypal scene in there that is massive. But yes, he's on a mission, right? And he's sent through. Well, people haven't got there yet, but he's sent on a mission. In Silverchair, what does it start out with? Jill and Edmund they're set on a quest in a land that's not their own. I mean, from the beginning to the end, there are so many parallels throughout the story that I can share another time because it actually gets quite intense. But all right, so
actually, the Odyssey,
huh?
Silverchair and the Odyssey have a lot in common too.
Yes,
pull on that thread a little bit. It's pretty.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah, the Odyssey. It's
Oh, here it is.
you find it?
Yep. I think let me scroll back up.
I'm not making more of it than I think. That's just what I read from the subtitles.
Okay, Jill says, "Oh, if we only knew," said Jill. "I think we do know," said Puddleglum. Do you mean you think everything will come right if we untie him?" said Scrub. "I don't know about that," said Puddleglum. "You see, Aslan didn't tell Pole what would happen. He only told her what to do. That fellow will be the death of us once he's up. I shouldn't wonder, but that doesn't let us off following the sign."
Classic Puddleglum.
I love him.
He'll
He's my favorite
probably
character.
kill us.
I have never liked Puddleglum until this year.
He's my favorite in all of
And
them.
It's great.
He's a faithful Narnian.
He's a fantastic character.
Faithful to Aslan, no matter what.
Yeah, he's faithful.
And that's the thing.
He's
It's like he
good,
might
right?
be negative, but he
But-
does
Yeah.
the thing.
He's a
And
bit of a
other people don't
drudge.
do it. He does the thing. He does what he's supposed to
He
do.
does the thing, and doing the thing is better than talking about doing the thing
Acting
or acting.
happy and not doing the thing.
I'd rather have somebody be a wet blanket and do the right thing than somebody who's optimistic and doesn't do jack.
Yeah.
What I also like about Puddleglum was one of the places that he emphasizes this most in terms of his character archetypes of basically saints throughout his whole narratives, all of his narratives. Be like he kind of emphasizes this over and over again that a saint doesn't look the same and does not have the same strength, but the same thing that goes
Yes.
through all saints is the willingness to answer the call. And that is over and over again, and you need all shapes and sizes and different personalities in the saints in order for the kingdom to make its work accomplished. And you can see that in all the variations of his characters, and you see him develop those in particular more broadly as Narnia goes on, because the characters in Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe aren't super different, other than Edmund and Lucy and a little bit Susan. Peter's kind of.
He's a bit vanilla.
Yeah, he's a bit vanilla. But the rest of them are very different, and then as goes on, you can see these different characters, and all of them are necessary in order for this kind of kingdom arc to happen leading to the end of time. So I think that's pretty interesting how he explores that, and especially in Puddleglum, it's like the least likely, for everyone to see this is a hero, and pulls them out and is this is our hero of the story.
Of the trio, he was the only one who had never seen Aslan. He had never had an experience with Aslan, and yet he was the most faithful to Aslan.
Is he the one that gives that quote about he'd rather believe in it, even if I was gonna say
I'd rather believe in the illusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that quote, and I thought it was
That kind of saved my faith.
so good.
If my made up world can lick your world, I'd rather believe mine than yours.
Yeah.
And you go, all right.
I have there's something I underlined here. I wondered what you guys thought of it. Where it's still in chapter 2. and he's talking about how he's being sent, and the conversation, like whether it's megalomania and all that. And he says, haven't you noticed how in our own little war here on Earth, there are different phases? And while any one phase is going on, people get into the habit of thinking and behaving as if it was going to be permanent. But really, the thing is changing under your hands all the time, and neither your assets nor your dangers this year are the same as the year before.
Yeah.
I was like,
It's good.
reality check.
There's a really good podcast I'm listening to. It's actually Joe Rogan, but the guest he has on is so amazing. This is one of the best podcasts I've listened to in a long time. And you know his podcasts are usually 2 hours, they're forever long. This one's almost 4 hours long. Like, that's how intense.
I don't think I've ever listened to a Joe Rogan podcast.
It's so good. But anyways, one of the lady talks about, so she grew up on the Alaskan frontier, and it's an outhouse, and no town, no city, no nothing, had to make their own everything. And her grandparents like had this crazy story of how they got over here and they like sailed the boat, and it was back in the day when they couldn't get visas. Hitler was doing what he was doing, and so super cool story. And then her dad was abusive, so she moved out when she was 15, and she talks about how in Alaska at that time there were no gender roles, that men did what women did what men did, and you just had to survive. And so she moved out when she was 15, became homeless, and just like lived her life and like fought for her life for like years. Wow. And then she ended up moving over here. I don't know, I haven't got to the end, obviously, I'm only an hour in, but moved over here.
3 more hours to go.
Yeah, and then she moved over here, like to the lower 48, and got super rich. She's a singer-songwriter now. Her name's Jewel. You guys might have heard of her, but yeah.
Wait,
she's
Jewel?
written a lot.
Jewel?
Yeah, Jewel.
And they made a television
Like
series.
our generation, Jewel?
Amazing.
Who will save your soul,
Like
Jewel?
she's like, you might have heard of her.
Oh, well, she won a ton of Grammys and stuff, but not
Yeah.
everybody knows
There's
her.
a whole
Oh
reality
no, we
series.
know her.
Okay, yeah.
We're older.
She was huge.
She was
Oh, I
big.
know her. I knew her songs when I was growing up.
Yeah.
It was just funny that you're like, I don't know if you've heard of her, and we're like,
You ever heard of Cher? Maybe you know.
but she was mainstream when we were younger.
Well, okay, the end of her
But I'm just
story-
saying, it's still one name.
I did not know any of this about Jewel, by the
Oh,
way.
you didn't? Okay,
No.
good. That
There's
makes
a
sense.
whole reality series about her family.
I knew none of this.
Have you seen it?
No, I
It's
just been
like
listening to
I
her
watched the
story.
whole series about her family. It's like
It's unreal.
they try to live on this frontier. Like everything that they do is about survival. Jewel's family.
Yeah.
They've been doing it since their grandparents.
Yeah.
I can't remember the series. You can find it.
It's unreal.
It's pretty.
And then her mom, when she got rich and famous, her mom stole $100 million from her. $100 million from her.
What?
Like, it's so nuts. Her story is like, there's no way. And so she talks about, she almost killed herself a million times, obviously, like
Wait,
trying
is this
to.
Jewel telling this story?
Yeah, it's her word for word telling this. And Joe, it just came out this week. Joe, it
I
literally
knew
is
her
blowing
mom
up.
was no good.
And she says, going back to why I even brought this up, is she says what you just said about like times changing and things changing. She said what kept her alive was she would sit outside when she was 15 and she would watch the tide go out and come in Alaska. And she said she just realized like sometimes it took longer than others for the tide to come back in. She's like, but it always came back in. She said, so with the tides changing, sometimes I would like rock myself to sleep and decide not to kill myself because I knew that if I just waited it out, if I just hung here and waited it out, the tides would change.
Wow.
And then I would make it. And then now she's, of course, worth millions and billions of dollars. But it's crazy. Her story is, I'm like, and she's so smart. She's talking about wisdom, about how she's like, you can't value something until you have a relationship with that thing. And so it talks about food and how the reason we don't care about food and value it is because we don't have a relationship with it. We don't cultivate it. We don't grow it. We don't cook it anymore. We don't do anything. And that's when you start losing these relationships with food and people is when horrible things start to happen, and you start grasping at. She talks about porn consumption. She talks about all these crazy things.
You really need to see the series because it's like every single thing they do in that series, from the beginning here to the end, is about survival. So
Yeah.
If they don't catch enough salmon, they're like, we're gonna go hungry. If they don't cut enough wood,
Yeah.
so when they have a big fish, they're like, they feel good for the rest of the year because they know that when it's like 20 below, they're gonna have something to eat.
Yeah.
That's how her family grew up.
Yeah, she says her grandma, her dad told her a story that he didn't think was significant, but her grandma once got a wheel of cheese, and it would take them forever. Like once a month, they could go somewhere and try to get things that they didn't have. And so they got a block of cheese and came back, and it was sitting on the ground, and the cat started eating it, like a cat. And so the grandma just chopped the head off the cat, opened the cat's stomach, took the cheese out, and then cooked the cat, ate the cat with cheese sauce.
I didn't see that one.
What?
And her dad was like, "That's normal."
Saturday
Like, that's,
night.
you know, and she said it. And the craziest part is, she's like, it wasn't because he was like, maybe she was a little, but they weren't mad at the cat. That was just life. Like, oh man, the cheese is gonna be gone if I don't hurry and harvest it. Like, if I don't get it, the cheese is gonna be
That
gone.
blows my mind. First of all, I didn't know. I just, I'm just, you said Jewel, I'm like, oh yeah, I know that song. I know that you love me, so you. And I was like, That's Jewel. That person is.
That's
Jewel?
what I'm telling you.
That's crazy.
When you look at her, you don't think.
Got
That's
to
what she
listen
said.
to
She
that.
was like, "There's no gender roles where I grew up. I know I did all." She said I wasn't strong enough as a man, but like I was mentally had to do the things to survive. And she was like, "Nobody." All of our problems were solved when they did that.
I need to look at the lyrics for music.
Just see.
Now I'm like, what did she write?
Yeah, it's like I said, it's Joe Rogan. It just came out, I think today or yesterday. It's very, very good. And I'm only an hour in. I got 2.5 hours to go.
So that thought, the thing that you read there is connected with like in chapter 3 talks about I don't know, I put that part in this one too connected it, where he says he's talking about wanting to jump in the ocean again and feel the refreshment of it all, and then he's like, I felt this impulse not to. He says this itch to have things over again, as if life were a film that could be enrolled twice or even made to work backwards. Was it possibly the root of all evil? No, of course the love of money was called that, but money itself, perhaps one valued it chiefly as a defense against chance, security for being able to have everything over again, a means of arresting and unrolling of the film. And I wrote in here that quote that he says in A Grief Observed, where he says an experience or a memory is not fully grown until it can be remembered. And just like, even thinking about that, like, in that story, understanding that it's like that old saying, like, you never step into the same river twice. We keep trying to step into that same, and the more that we keep trying to do that and have that permanency, I think the more it frustrates us in the midst of trauma, but part of it also recognizing trauma and grief and loss and moving forward beyond things is recognizing that, like, you're never going to step in the same river twice. You're never going to have the same experience.
Is that part of like what Aslan says?
That's healing.
I never do this. I never do it the same way twice.
Yeah. But I mean, just watching, it's like if you want that ocean to come in the exact same way, it's never going to happen again.
It's oddly healing.
And that can be discouraging if you want it to be that way, right? But it can also be relieving too if you can recognize that it's always you.
And he explores that thing over and over again in these books, especially the first two. But it talks like Chile talks about the rearing of children and on the silent planet. And he says it much better in here though in that part. He mentioned it. Yeah, you're totally right. You're spot on, man. That's I can definitely see it in terms of.
It's a big thing in Grief Observed. It's like remembering, how it's so different than the real thing. He expected it to be the exact same, He's like, if she was here, she would have corrected me on so many things by now. But then he weirdly finds comfort in that in the end, like you said. Weird backwardsly.
Yeah, just those memories can be, you can value memory for being a memory itself, not as a grief. I say this too on the eve of Lily turns 9 tomorrow. And there's a part of me like I keep telling her, like, you can't turn 9. You have to stay at 8 because I know if she turns 9, the next year she could turn 10, and then she could turn 11. But eventually, And I'm like, but my challenge as a parent in that sadness is also to find joy in the fact that yes, I can never fully go back to those memories, but I still have those memories.
You had that experience.
And I had the experience, and there's some goodness in not being able to go back.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's fully grown, nothing's fully grown until it can be remembered. It's experience.
The wave that's coming towards you. Theme.
I love him talk. I mean, just even in just the chapter 2, just him talking about, I'm not anyone special. I'm not going because I'm someone special. I mean, that's a biblical theme too. It's like, it's never anyone.
Yeah, go ahead and read that because there's some good stuff in that.
Well, there's that first part I read, and then because he's talking about, he says, don't imagine I've been selected to go to Perelandra because I'm anyone in particular. One never can see, or not till long afterwards, why anyone was selected for any job. And when one does, it is usually some reason that leaves no room for vanity. Certainly, it is never for what the man himself would have regarded as his chief qualifications. I rather fancy I'm being sent because those two blackguards who kidnapped me and took me to Maleldil did something which they never intended, namely, give a human being a chance to learn that language. That's just that part there.
Yeah, but that's exactly what Randy was talking about, and that he was it wasn't a qualification that he had. It was a perchance accident. He just happens to know the language, and so he's going because he knows the language in that. And
that's like this. I mean, it's the story of all time. God always chooses the
unlikely. Yes, we can't. Oh, so here's what I said: we can't know till long afterwards. And then when we look at it, we look back and we're like, oh. Yeah, okay, I see how that lined up right there. I see how that worked out. Okay, I was chosen for this because of this, not because I'm Ransom the Great, but I mean, to have gone to another world and come back, how do you keep yourself grounded? How do you... No one shares your experience. That was the same thing that the movie The Martian played with when he comes back. No one has that experience of being on another planet and living. So how can you relate to people? Your relationships, you've experienced something no one else can even articulate.
A lot of times it fades though. I mean, look at Narnia. Like they come back from Narnia, and you have like Susan who's like, oh, that was a game we played when we were kids, you know. And then you have Lucy, the innocent, forever, her whole life. It will always remain true and real, and like nothing can alter that. And you know, we all. I think that a lot of times it happens is we forget.
Yeah.
We forget the experience.
I'll be honest. I think that most of his figures, his fictional figures that have some kind of exceptional experience, I think he gives them a little bit of a pride streak to them, except for Lucy. But almost all of them are like, oh yeah, but
I'm a little better than
you kind of know who you know. And
Does that happen with Ransom? I don't remember it, but
I felt like part of me was like, all right, how do you deserve this little ego trip that you got in the beginning when you come back and start calling people an ass and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Like, what, you know?
Yeah, because there's a certain like I think a God-given confidence that we can have.
Yeah.
And it can sometimes be viewed as an arrogance or a pride.
Right.
And so it's like...
So that's what I'm saying. Is like I don't really know fully what it is.
Right.
I'm like, what was it? What was your experience such to deserve this transformation from where you were a scaredy, cat out of the planet, to basically being here and being like,
look at me.
I'll school you all
because Great Divorce. All the see-through, what are they called? The
man-shaped stains?
The man-shaped, the angels. The
solid people.
The solid people.
Yeah.
Not them. The solid people. The opposite.
Of the mansions.
The solid people, like, they were just so confident. It was never like it was just like, I know because I know.
Yeah.
Not because they didn't say those things, but that's what you read. Because they know their shit. When they have the full knowledge.
The translucent people, they were the ones who were arrogant.
Yeah, they were the arrogant
full of
ones.
Pride.
And full of pride. It's just really interesting in how you. Ransom, of course, is still on this side of heaven. So it's like I don't know how you walk in that.
Well, from what I know of Lewis, he could be like that too. Like
absolutely.
Students talked about him was like. He was extremely humble and pious and stuff like that. I mean, he gave everything that he earned away without, nobody knew and stuff like that. And he was humble, but he was also that British Don kind of bit on like, I really do know.
He said himself he said he could be a prig.
With arrogance, yeah.
I think that's why he leans so much to the other side of the second part of his life.
Well, how does it feel to have your name on books and he went forward and he was like, to be one of the most notorious Christian writers in the world, and then he was like, one cannot help but think, or one cannot try to not think too much about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was like, obviously that turned through his head.
Absolutely.
Enough where he was like, oh, I'm man of the year for Time magazine.
Yes.
Or
come on, that is incredible.
I remember Eric Metaxas was interviewing, and this actually annoyed me, this interview a little bit, but was interviewing Walter Hooper. It was one you can watch on YouTube. And he talks about, because the first half of his life, Lewis was so arrogant.
Yep.
Like the epitome of like some academic who's like treats you like a moron if you think anything other than what he thinks.
Yep.
And I think he recognized that so much that he went so much to the opposite extreme. On the second, when he became a Christian, he tried to avoid pride at all costs most of the time. And so he would downplay, like, and you see it in so many of the beginnings of his books where he's like, not that I know anything about this, or, I don't.
I'm not a theologian. Go tell.
Yeah, he does it here.
Yeah, but you.
You or I probably would have never had this off of Ransom.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think Lewis,
This
like,
is all on his character sometimes.
like I'm sure because he had that most of his life because he's a normal human. I think he did, he did have those like feelings. He would constantly reject them or try to reject the feelings of like arrogance or pride or anything like that because he was, as he said, a prig.
I do like the one story where we found this out when we went to the senior common room at Magdalen. There was the bet book they had where if two professors got into an academic argument, they would make a bet to see which one was right, and then they would fulfill the bet once it was found out. And there was a professor who bet Lewis that the word eros was in the Odyssey. The Iliad and the Odyssey, or just one of, I think it might have just been the Odyssey, or it could have been both of them. Anyway, they bet a certain bottle of wine. The next entry says, Professor so-and-so paid Lewis in this bottle of wine. So
he won that argument.
He won that argument. I don't think he lost many of those arguments.
I was trying to find that because I took pictures of that bet book. It's really cool.
I was gonna. It's something. It's kind of backtracking a little bit, but it's all still very applicable. Talking about especially the good that comes, and not holding on to the good, and this idea of money and the kind of desire for new things to be kept as the root of all evil. But it occurred to me as you guys were speaking that time in itself in this series is a gift to mortals. And it's not a super touched on theme except in this book a little bit. It's the inability to go backwards. The inability to repeat the exact same thing is in and of itself a joy. And that's almost part of what the lady talks about when they first meet. It's like this idea that the joy that comes next is in and of itself the greatest joy. Yeah. And if we could go back, if we could repeat the thing, we would just be stuck on a scratch, like a record player. Right. And the things that we lose, the things we leave behind, the fact that we cannot go back to get those things is a gift from God. Yeah. And it's a gift in two ways. It's a gift because there's another joy coming that He's giving to us, but also it's a gift because that limitation allows us to trust Him, who is the one who created us. And that very thing that we must do, that in order to bridge that gap between Him and us, is the thing that He wants most from us. So it's like this limitation is in and of itself a drawing in.
Shadowlands.
It's really cool.
And I think it's the fact that if we're not preoccupied with an experience and trying to get back there, there's almost a fear that you can have in a particular experience that you're like, this is going to be gone soon, this is going to be gone soon, this is going to be gone soon, and I can't hold on to it, it's slipping away. It can stop us from the genuine enjoyment of that. Whereas if you could go back, I mean, I'm like, I think the first time that I held Lily when she was born was one of the few times in my life that I've been like, man, definitely God exists, Yeah. But I'm like, I think back on that, and I'm like, if I can do that again, I'm cheapen it. And if I could do that again and again and again and again and again, if we take it away, as much as I want to go back and experience that, it's meant to only be experienced once.
That's an economic theory too, the diminishing rate of marginal utility. Wow, pull that from the archives.
That's good. That's good.
From my econ degree. But just the more you do something, you get one cookie that you want so bad, you have it, and it's the greatest thing ever. You get it again, it's about the same as good as it was the first time. Third one, it's getting a little sick of it. And then by the 20th, that same cookie, you're like going to throw up. It's like done the opposite effect. And we would always try to calculate the rate of that with productivity and try to see like when people start being less productive. But super fascinating thought. That's just truth in every sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you look at it.
It's funny too because that actually applies to my experience of this book in isolation. On the like the fourth or fifth time that I've read it, I get through it. I see new things. And I'm like, it's great, but I also see more holes, and I see more things that are like not quite developed. But then when I come into community and I talk with everybody about it, we find new things that add to that experience and make it new. But if I myself try to relive the thing over and over again, I get less and less out of it every single time. But when I when like you all bring your minds into the equation, and we have this kind of group think, this like almost spiritual, moment, it's like that brings it into this, new place. It's really beautiful.
Welcome, mind meld.
Yeah.
I think I just want to read this quote really quick. That was so good, going off what Randy was saying about how in this book they really push the thought of you're not leaving anything behind at all. You're never leaving anything behind. And that's so hard for us to grasp because so many times you hear people say, those were the best years of my life, or those are the whatever. And it's like, that's such a detrimental way to think. Like, always. It doesn't matter if you're 80 or you're 10 or whatever. But he says here, I don't think this is spoiling anything really, but just in like chapter 5 or 6, says, the world is so much larger than I thought. I thought we went along paths, but it seems there are no paths. The going itself is the path. And then you go down a little and it says, he's asking her if she missed someone. You can know who that is. But she was like, do you miss that person? And she doesn't understand what missing means. Like he's like, well, you looked disappointed when you saw me. And she's like, wow, I'm getting older every second, And then she said, how could there be anything I did not want? Yeah. And it was like because he asked her, did you want me? Because I don't think you wanted me, you wanted him. You wanted to see him and you saw me. And she said, how could there be anything that I don't want? And I was like, wow, that just messed me up. I was like, that is so good. Like, that's how we were meant to be, I think, of course.
That's one thing was noticing the other side of the planet, but more so here, like there's an element of like this innocence that he's learning from the Harasa, the way they view things. We talked about experiencing things with him. And here in this one, he's getting thrown into this innocent, pre-fallen world, right? He's experiencing this incredible innocence. And so I don't normally love descriptive scenes where it describes nature, but the chapter 3 especially, and in 4, it just gets like such a trip. But one thing that I read, that I want to read, that really like hit me, and I'm not really sure why, but it's along the lines of the innocence and kind of like him seeing, later on he sees her like question these things when she says I'm getting old. It's almost like you almost sense this disappointment with her, but it's never really there. So it's kind of this weird thing. But anyway, this is not that. This is when he's still kind of going on the waters and stuff. It says, and for the meantime, the coolness of the water and the freedom of his limbs were still a novelty and a delight, but more than all those was something else at which I have already hinted, and which can hardly be put into words, the strange sense of excessive pleasure which seems somehow to be communicated to him through all his senses at once. I use the word excessive because Ransom himself can only describe it by saying that for his first few days in Perelandra, he was haunted not by a feeling of guilt, but by surprise that he had no such feeling. There is an exuberance or prodigality of sweetness about the mere act of living, which our race finds it's difficult not to associate with forbidden and extravagant actions. And it's just kind of, it's like, that's what we're longing to get back. We are longing to get back to something, right?
Yeah.
It's like the ability to experience things the way we were meant to be.
Yeah.
It's just kind of.
It's crazy that Lewis can describe it that way. I remember reading that, thinking the same thought. Like, that's how it's supposed to be. That's what we want.
The longing. In Pilgrim's Regress, his whole goal is to get back to the island. To get to the island. The island's it's the longing to be there. It's the longing we're waiting for. As if you guys listen to Heath McNeese, he sings about that's the longing. He's thrown into the innocence, and we would see too much pleasure. We'd feel guilt. We'd feel the heaviness of. the weight of glory, and
or awkwardness as he does when
yes.
he and Lewis are talking in the cottage.
It's awkward.
And when he's talking to her, he can't look at her.
Yeah.
We ask,
we ask too little, not enough.
Yeah.
And it's all coming together.
That's good.
Coming together now.
Damn, man, he's every single thing he wrote.
I do want to hit one quick thing here. The other thing is the Black Archon, our own Bent Oyarsa, is meditating on some sort of attack on Perelandra.
He needs another vehicle to get there. He can't go himself.
But he needs another vehicle to get there because he can't get there himself. So, Lewis is setting this up, right? He's setting this up because there's going to be an attack. And so we know...
Cannon fired.
Cannon fired. It's cannon fired. What's the attack? What's it going to look like? What can we expect? What in the world... When you start reading how Lewis gets there, or not Lewis... When Ransom gets there, you think, how in the world could anyone else get there? What other means could someone else get to this place? And so it's cannon fired. The bent one is always going after innocence. He's always going after the innocence. Because
I can't handle the... Oh, it's terrible.
Don't. Let's not even go there yet. It's too hard. I don't like it either. It's really hard when you get to that.
It's so hard to read.
So,
in this book or the next?
Yes.
In this
book.
So if you're chapters 3,
Get ready
4,
for
5, 6,
Brace myself?
Yeah.
it's going to get wild, and in a good way, because you are going to wrestle with thoughts you've never wrestled with before. You may have, maybe you're, but it just.
Well, you're watching play out what all of us have gone through, but we didn't know we were going through at the time, and you're seeing it happen, and you want to save innocence. You'll see.
I guess they give like a foreshadowing right with this conversation, because
Yes.
I felt sick reading that. I'm
Yes.
like, oh, I wish he would shut up.
That's a foreshadowing
But also,
to what's about to
he's
happen.
just doing like it's not he has these conniving motives where he's trying to like undermine her, to change her mind, to make her know something bad. It's like he's just telling her the truth, but the truth is
You'll see.
hard.
You'll see. Oof.
Well, because we know the serpent never tells full lies. He always bends the truth just enough. That's why he's the bent one. He just bends the truth. Just bends the truth. And so, to see that bending play out, to see the scripture, he has not surely said. To watch that play out in a long dialogue conversation, Lewis takes the serpent scene and says, let's extend it into a dialogue, like David was saying, like over eons. Like how long would that take? Months and months and months and months. Oh, sorry, Randy. You could have had it, man. I gave it right to you.
Randy and I shared that thought, so I will take it too.
So, it's about to get really, really good. If you,
So it's a lot better than I thought. The whole series is a lot better than I expected. I'm not into the sci-fi world very much, and this is just way beyond that.
I didn't read for a long time because sci-fi wasn't my thing.
It's way beyond that, though.
Yeah.
That's way different. Though, funny, the Martian book actually deals with that theme you talked about at the end of the Martian.
Mm-hmm.
The Martian book deals with that even more at the end, and it's way better. The whole book's better, but
Of course.
Naturally, but it's also way funnier too. So there's that. But yeah, that's a good sci-fi. If you're gonna read sci-fi, any sci-fi at all, The Martian
Interesting.
is the great place to start.
I've heard The Martians are great. I've heard that's great.
Yeah. Andy Weir's got some serious chops, and he does a really good one. His newest one, Project Hail Mary. That is also a really good one. That one made me giddy at several points. It was really fun. Yeah.
All right. If there are no other comments on the first beginning, because I don't want to get too far. I don't want to get too far into the conversations and stuff, because I really want everyone to be on the same page. So we'll say we'll take the next. Let's say
60%.
Yeah, next 60% of the book on next time, and because the conversations again.
So we'll have probably 2 more groups of this one.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, got that the last third of the book is way too dense.
It's gonna be, and yeah, there's some stuff right now I get emotional just thinking about on it, because it's gonna Yeah, it's going to
Do
wreck
we
you.
all agree that Ransom's name is him, Lewis pulling a shift and puzzle again because he was held for ransom? Or is that just me coming up with that in the first book? why his name is
Then
Ransom?
just button it up. Just gonna button it up for later.
Okay. Just sounds like it to me. You know, he pulled that with Puzzle in Narnia, he pulled that with Shift in Narnia. So when I read Ransom, I was like, he's probably going to be held for ransom. He was held for ransom. Just guessing. Everybody's giving me a weird look.
There's also, throw this out there, there's also the ransom theory of atonement.
Okay.
Yeah, give it another 80 pages. You'll start to see some.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a little too soon for that. I just based it out of the Silent Planet. I'm like, I started reading the book and I said, this guy's name's Ransom. I know Ransom personally, but I was like, I wonder if he's pulling another Narnia trick here.
Yeah, you'll find out probably tomorrow because I'm guessing you're going to plow through it like a maniac.
Nice.
Yeah, it goes very
I'll find out
quickly.
tomorrow.
All right, I guess we'll end it tonight. We'll wrap it up. This is Perelandra Part I, Verum Fabula Fellowship. Further up.
Further in.